Well, listen, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I am really, really excited about this upcoming hour because we have a couple of guests that are just really brilliant and highly knowledgeable in a very important subject to the interior design industry. I do have a couple of announcements I want to make before we get started. The first is mark your calendar for October 9th. My webinar guest will be Ty Farrow, the noted architect out of Toronto and author of Constructing Health. He's a frequent keynote around the world. He was just in Barcelona 2 or 3 weeks ago. Last week he was in Brazil, and in a couple of weeks he'll be in Singapore. And what's interesting is that is a quote from his book. Well-designed space is like a prescription that improves health. Design is like food. It can enrich us or starve us. Design is never neutral. You are going to love the hour with Ty Farrow. On November 13th, we'll be joined by Erica Soret and Katie Decker Erickson, business coaches and marketing specialists. We're doing this at your request. One of the questions I get a lot from designers is, okay, I'm learning the science, but how do I market it? How do I start talking about it? Well, that hour will be devoted to giving you ideas for your website, for emails. It's marketing and business coaching. And the big one is coming up on October 24th. It's a full day at October High Point Market, October 24th. And the event is When Design Heals, How Interior Design Shapes Health. It's a full day. The first half of the day will be devoted to science and biophilia and fractal patterning. And the second half of the day, again, will be devoted to marketing. The keynote for October 24th is Jennifer Walsh, who is a strategic advisor to the Brain Health Initiative at Harvard University. And she's a faculty advisor to the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics with Dr. Anjan Chatterjee. She is a specialist in biophilia, in neuroaesthetics, and the beauty they inspire. If you're coming to market, this is a must attend. We did an event in April market. We had about 80 designers. There was networking, there was connecting, and the beginning of the building of the community of designers interested in neuroaesthetics and biophilia. So if you want to join, if you want to register, go to scienceanddesign.com and click on events. Okay, here we go. I am so excited to introduce my guests. Let me start with Professor Richard Taylor, professor of physics, psychology, and art, and is head of the physics department at the University of Oregon. Richard has worked in the US, the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Australia, Sweden. He doesn't have a home. He just goes to all these places, and New Zealand, and has published 350 papers. He's been featured in television documentaries on ABC, PBS, and the BBC, and has given talks for organizations as diverse as the Nobel Foundation, the White House, the Royal Society, and national art galleries such as the Pompidou Center and the Guggenheim Museum. Well, he studies natural patterns called fractals, which you'll hear about today, with a focus on bioinspiration, exploring the favorable properties that make fractals so prevalent in nature and applying them to our world, to architecture, art, engineering, neuroscience, physics, and psychology. It is also my pleasure to introduce, coming to you from Austria, Dr. Anastasija and architect Martin Lesjak, our co-founders and leaders of the internationally established product design studio 13 and 9 Design and the architecture firm InnoCAD in Graz, Austria. They've completed numerous projects of varying size and scope in the fields of architecture and interior design, including residential, office, hospitality, healthcare, mixed use. They've got it all covered, folks. Educational, public, and retail, as well as developing numerous product collections, including furniture design, lighting, acoustics, textile design, accessories. These guys don't ever take a day off. Exhibitions and sound design. They design for international companies such as Mohawk Group, Momentum Textiles and Wall Covering, and numerous others. Over the decades, their designs have been acknowledged with multiple international product awards, such as at NeoCon this year with the Innovation in the Business Impact Award, as well as multiple Interior Design Magazine awards. Beyond that, they were recently recognized with 2 prestigious international prizes, the Quality Choice Prize 2025 from the European Society for Quality Research in Stockholm, and the coveted Best of Competition Award from the International Interior Design Association at the 51st Annual Interior Design Competition in Chicago. So welcome to Richard, Anna, and Martin. Thank you so much for joining us. The way we're going to do this today, everybody, is that we're going to take the first 15 minutes or so to really cover the basics of this subject called fractals. I find that a lot of you are using fractals, but you may not know exactly what a fractal is. So we're going to start with a couple of basics, and then after that, Richard, Anna, and Martin will take over and show you some projects that they've been working on and how they develop them. So let me just start with the three of you and go over the basic. Please explain the basic relationship of biophilia to fractal patterns, essentially explaining what is a fractal.
Right. Thank you, Mike, and thank you everybody for turning up. It's always fun to talk about fractals. So, all of you will be, I'm sure, familiar with biophilia. Nature has a deep beauty to it, and I think it's a really important question. What is it that we like to look at? And in this case, it is, what do we need to look at? And for millions of years, we've been surrounded by nature's beauty. And then in the last thousands of years, we've chosen to gradually separate ourselves away into the built environment. And so in the 1980s, the biophilia movement started with a book called The Biophilia Hypothesis, which its main principle was to recognize this deep innate connection that all humans have with nature, and that we need to accommodate it. Particularly exciting for me were a number of experiments in the 90s that showed the profound effect that nature can have on the human body. In particular, one that showed that if you look out at nature, your body can recover far more quickly from major surgery. And, so these are profound effects. I was really excited by these pioneering experiments, but they left a vital question unanswered, which is, what is it precisely about nature that is inducing all of these remarkable health and well-being effects? And so that's where we come in that we believe that when you look out at nature, a typical scene, you'll see trees, clouds, mountains, rivers, and they all follow these shapes that are called fractal patterns. And so that's the connection between biophilia and fractals. We believe that, of course, there's many things about nature that we like, but we think that one of the central sort of qualities that are, inducing all of these really great effects in us are these things called fractals. Mike mentioned that many of you will have heard the word fractal. It's a weird sounding name and it puts people off a little bit, but it's actually a very simple principle, and nature uses it on most of its objects. All that a fractal is a pattern that repeats at different size scales. So a tree is a great example. If you look at a tree, it's got big branches, but it's got smaller branches growing out of those and smaller branches. And so that's a typical fractal. And the key thing for today is all of that repetition our eyes crave and need to look at. And that's what's triggering all of these great responses.
A quick follow-up, Richard. Why do our eyes need and crave that? Is there some part of the evolutionary inheritance? Is that part of our past?
Yeah, I mean, my main job at the university is studying human vision, and it really is a beautiful system. We should wake up every morning, and when we open our eyes, we should say, wow, what an amazing ability to see these things. And, this beautiful human visual system didn't happen overnight. It's actually taken 600 million years. And during that whole evolution, it's been surrounded by nature's fractal patterns. And so that's what it's been gradually evolving to try and accommodate. And so we talk about this term fractal fluency, that our visual systems have become fluent in the visual language of fractals. And when we head into the built environment, that's a bit like being taken to some far off land where now we have to struggle with a foreign language. And we can try and understand that language, but we're truly fluent in nature's fractals. And so it's taken a long time for us to accommodate it. And that's why it's absolutely vital because in some sense we're hardwired to need to look at these fractals. So it's bizarre that we might spend our days not doing that.
So it's almost essential then to calm the human individual. It's almost essential to be sure to include fractal patterning and design in our environments.
Absolutely.
Is that fair?
Martin and Anna and I talk about this a lot because the strength of the scientific experiments, which we'll get into in this next hour, are very, very clear, to the point where we feel in the future that if people don't put these fractal patterns into, the built environment, then they'll be seen as being incompetent, and there may be even requirements to do so in the future. So I think that this is the brave new world that we're heading for, and it'll be a massive improvement.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anastasia, why do you see the importance of biophilic design in our built environment?
Um, yeah, like Richard mentioned it before, like or how we live and work. It's we are surrounded by rectangular buildings. From the moment we wake up, we are kind of a certain tunnel where we join our day with a rectangular room. We drive by car, we get to the work, and we already know statistic, over 90% of our time we spend indoors.
Mm-hmm.
This is a huge shift that came with globalization, urbanization, where we live, how we use our mobility, and of course, all our digital devices. So I think that we have a certain role in design where we can use surfaces and create interface for knowledge and science. That's Richard just introduced that. And exactly 10 years ago, Martin and I started to really dig deep into what is the science behind biophilic design, because not everywhere we can use nature, plants, install nature analogs, work with the natural materials. There are certain limitations. So we wanted to figure out, is there any other way to use bio-inspiration to enrich our surfaces with added value, which is very important for us. And this is how we started to do a research and how we came to Professor Taylor. We have our collaboration now for almost 8 years, and we learned so much about biophilic design and science behind biophilic design. And it became one of our legacies to work with tools that we co-created together with Richard. And more and more we see requests for providing scientific studies, providing projects, also from the side of the clients. We see a question how to work with biophilic design, and if you don't have a possibility to put through all these segments of biophilic design, is there any solution that people can use in their spaces, which not might always be installing nature in the space?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's another aspect, if I may add. It's not only about putting nature to the built environment. I mean, it's good to have and nice to have wherever it's possible. But the next level is when we talk about stress reduction. Not every fractal is stress reductive.
Mm.
So what we do with fractal design is we get based on Richard's research and experiments, we extract the most powerful fractals that have certain properties that lower the stress level of people up to 60%. And this is then the science design. It's good to have fractals in nature, but not every fractal is stress reductive. It doesn't hurt anyone, but it's not the same when we talk about health and science.
Okay. Richard, when I talk about this, I do quote you, and one of the quotes that I use is that fractals are the basic building blocks of nature. Can you expand on that just for a second and remind us that we are fractals?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It almost seems like a conspiracy theory, right? That fractals pop up everywhere. And yeah, they really are. But as I said before, it's a very simple principle. But the beauty of it is all of the positive consequences that come out of that simple repetition. And that's a lot of what I study, is that these really favorable properties. But visually, there's no doubt that they, have this special element. And there's I like to refer to it as a resonance between the human visual system and nature. And, we'll be talking about exactly what happens in your eye and in your brain. But yeah, they are the other kind of nice name that I like is the fingerprint of nature. And
I like that.
when I mentioned I'm actually looking out of my window now, and I can see trees and clouds and rivers, and it goes on and on, coastlines and lightning. And so nature through those 600 million years that I mentioned, it's kind of gravitated towards this natural design. And so it is a little bizarre. And maybe humans need to show more respect, particularly scientists. A lot of scientists think that they can outdo nature. And of course, that was the Industrial Revolution. And now I think over the last 50 years, we're changing our attitudes and being more respectful and saying, well, we can learn a lot from nature. And as Martin says, it's really crucial that we don't copy nature, because the built environment is fundamentally different. Running for a plane in an airport is a different experience from wandering through a forest. So we can't just take those fractals that we see in a forest and put them in the airport, because so many things are different. The environment that you're putting it into, the tasks that you're doing, your basic needs. So our computer programs take that, basic building block, but then adapt it to make it appropriate for this new environment that we spend so much time in.
And I think it's important to remind ourselves that the veins in a leaf are much like the veins in our bodies, that we really are walking fractals in a way. So listen, what I'm going to do, that's a quick introduction to the subject generally of fractal beauty and fractal fluency. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sit back a little bit and let Richard, Anna, and Martin show you some of their projects and some of the things that they've done recently that earned them quite a few awards. So go ahead and take over, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nächste Schatz. Genau. Bist du selbst? Genau. So.
Is the screen visible?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So the Power Fractals Nature Design Blueprint for Well-Being. We prepared a couple of slides that we want to share with you that explain our whole idea of fractal design and how to implement it in the built environment. And we will show some examples also from our product design studio, 13 and 9, that are already on the market, as well as some architectural and interior design applications from my company, InnoCAD Architecture. But I would like to start with Richard to once more quickly go through the science approach of fractals with some supporting slides. So we call ourselves the Science Design Lab, which is the team of 13 and 9, InnoCAD, and Professor Richard Taylor and his team. So we are a quite transdisciplinary team working in architecture, interior design, product, sound design, and science and research. And now I want to hand over to Richard. I think it's a little bit easier to explain what is a fractal supported by the images. Please, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And I agree with that, I think I first heard the word fractal in the mid-1980s, and I was doing a PhD in physics, and the word put me off. I thought, oh, this thing sounds horribly mathematical and it has nothing to do with me. And so, you know, what I want to emphasize is just, you know, this is not mathematics. This is about nature and how simple the idea is. So if we look at these images on the screen,
My screen went, yeah, sorry.
on the left-hand side, you can see what's called an exact fractal. So you take this tree and you zoom in at different magnifications and the same pattern keeps on repeating exactly. And so we refer to that as an exact fractal. Then when you mix noise and randomness into that pattern, it disrupts the exact repetition. And the consequence is that the patterns just look similar at different size scales. And as we all know, there's a lot of randomness in nature. And so that's what actually happens in nature. So the right-hand image shows a real tree. And there, as we zoom in, the patterns just look similar at different size scales. And what's happening is that because of that disruption of the randomness, is the general qualities of the pattern are repeating, and refer to those as the statistical patterns. And so the second type on the right-hand side, the real type that we see in nature, are referred to as statistical fractals, while the cleaner versions that computers often generated are referred to as exact fractals. Martin, could you do the next screen? Yeah, so you know, there are a few exact fractals in nature. So, you know, fans of broccoli and cauliflower, you'll be happy to know that those are exact fractals. But when you look out on a typical scene, those are statistical fractals. So, you know, clouds are a great example, that as you zoom in on the clouds, you'll see bumps, but you'll see smaller bumps and smaller bumps. And those look similar at different size scales. So clouds, trees, mountains, rivers, they're all statistical fractals. And I think the key thing for what we're talking about, given our innate deep connection, is that they're not just in nature, but for many, many years, starting with the ancient Greeks in 700 BC, there are examples of fractals in artworks. And there's two examples here, Salvador Dali from the 1930s and Morkesha from the 1950s. But one of the famous ones that I work on a lot is Jackson Pollock's paintings from the 1950s. Next slide, please, Martin. So what is it that's so special about fractals? Why is it that we crave to look at them? And it's the complexity, the visual complexity. All of those repeating patterns generate a very rich complexity that we need to look at. Now, so all fractals are complex, but some are more complex than others. So we've introduced a term that its technical name is fractal dimension, but that's just a technical term. We refer to it as D, and it's on a scale between 1 and 2, and it quantifies the complexity. So fractals with lower D values are more simple and sparse. You can see on the right-hand side, a cloud is a great example of a low complexity fractal. That middle image is cracks in the mud, so that's a bit more complex, so that's 1.7. And then you can see all of those trees in the forest produce a very rich, intricate pattern. Those are quantified by D equals 1.9. Next slide, please, Martin. So generally, the more fine scale patterns that go into that fractal mix, the more complex it looks. And here's a few examples. So if you picture that top left, that cloud, you know, the weather conditions have produced a relatively simple pattern. So that has a lower D value. And then as the weather changes, it generates those very fine scale wispy values, and that generates a higher D value. And then if we look at a tree, in midsummer, when the tree has leaves, that will produce a low D value, maybe 1.3. And then in the fall, when it loses its leaves, it reveals all the fine structure of the twigs, and that raises the D value up to about 1.9. Next slide, please, Martin. So this is the key thing, that when you look out at nature, you'll see lots of fractal objects, and some will have a D value of 1.1, all the way up to some having 1.9. But the most prevalent ones are the mid-D, the mid-complexity fractals that you can see on this graph. And so those are the ones that through those millions of years that we have become most familiar with. And those are the ones that we crave to actually look at. Next slide, please. So my day job is developing bionic eyes to cure blindness. And I just mentioned that because we do a lot of studying of the human visual system. And it really is remarkable. And, you know, I've just given you a few facts here that when you look out at nature, your brain receives 2 billion pieces of data from your eyes every second. That data is flying down your optic nerve at speeds close to a bullet. Way faster, hundreds of times faster than high-speed internet. And your brain gets absolutely bombarded with this information. So to cope, your brain uses up to 30% of its volume to kind of process all of this data. So the brain is actually in danger of becoming overwhelmed. But the good news, as we keep on mentioning, is that over the last 600 million years, your brain has evolved. It's almost, if you picture it like a computer, it's developed software programs to analyze all of this data efficiently. And, you know, I want to keep on emphasizing 600 million years of development to get to where we are today. Next slide, please, Martin. And so this leads to the fractal fluency hypothesis that humans have evolved to become fluent in nature's visual language. And when we look at fractals, all of our research shows that fractals trigger a whole set of subconscious processes, meaning that we're not even conscious of them, and they unfold in milliseconds. And in particular, we all possess this enhanced processing ability to process the information of mid-D fractals, and that occurs at many stages of the visual system. Next slide, please, Martin. So your eye motion, when you're looking at things, is fractal. That's what your eye wants to do. And so when it looks at a fractal, it's like a resonance between what your eye wants to do and what it's being asked to do. And so that's the equivalent of like opening up the floodgates and allowing all of this information to pass through your eye and onto the brain. And then we use MRI studies to look at which parts of the brain are getting activated. And one of the key regions is a region called the parahippocampal region, and that's involved in memory. And so what your brain is doing as all of this fractal imagery comes into the brain, your brain is actually comparing that imagery to imagery that you've already stored in your long-term memory.
Wow.
It also activates the default mode network. Now, that's a really fascinating network in the brain. It's activated during restful activities like daydreaming and meditation. So the fact that the fractals activate that network shows that the brain is actually enjoying this process of understanding fractals. And this fractal fluency places you in a visual comfort zone, and it boosts your cognition, in particularly abilities in terms of pattern recognition and memory. Next slide, please. So these are the key things that produce the well-being. So in particular, our studies show that because of when we shift into this visual comfort zone, it relaxes your body by up to 60%, which is a huge amount for a non-pharmaceutical approach to stress. So these stress-reducing fractals we refer to as biophilic fractals because we believe they are responsible for biophilia's well-known effects. I mentioned one earlier, that it can even accelerate your recovery from major surgery. And what's happening is the fractals are placing your body in a very reduced stress level, and that allows all sorts of processes to happen. But it also boosts nature's restorative power, and that will reduce mental fatigue and prevent occupational burnout. Next slide, please, Martin. So I just want to quickly mention some consequences. So we just published a paper that links viewing fractals to seasonal depression. So in the wintertime, you don't see as many fractals, and in particular, you don't see the mid-D fractals. So a lack of fractals could lead to seasonal depression. Also, climate change climate change, we predict, will reduce the amount of these special mid-D fractals. And if that happens, then the only source for these mid-D fractals will be the ones that we put in the built environment. Next slide, please.
And this is maybe exactly, Richard, to the question why biophilia, because by reducing through climate changes, by reducing these mid-D fractals, maybe our spaces will have a chance to provide solutions that maybe restore these mid-D fractals in our artificial spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of our research shows that it's going to be very effective when we put these designs into the built environment. And I've just got listed here a few key factors. So observation periods, you don't have to look at these fractals for long. I mentioned that they start going within milliseconds of you looking at these things. And within 10 seconds, we're seeing profound effects. It's also environmental exposure, meaning that you don't have to stare directly at a fractal. So if you're walking along a corridor, it's just enough to have it on the carpets. It's environmental exposure, not direct looking at it. Persistence, that all of our experiments are indicating that when you stop looking at the fractal, the positive effects will persist. And then the key thing that I find really exciting is the creative freedom, that as long as you capture this mid-complexity in your designs, you can do all sorts of extra peripheral things. So it's not like only one fractal will work. You're going to have lots of flexibility in terms of your designs. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so Martin said that, you know, and this is key, that you can't just copy nature and expect it to work. So our programs allow us to tune the D value, that level of complexity, and based on three things: the environment itself. So the more simple the environment, the higher the complexity we have to put in. Also, another one is activities that are going on in that environment. Do you want the person to, how much do you want that person to be relaxed? So for example, if you have a brain surgeon operating in a hospital, that's going to be a very different task from when you're relaxing, you know, having a gin and tonic, for example. So we can tune the D value based on the tasks and also on the type of person as well, that we all, you know, although we all share this fractal fluency, it's a fundamental part of being a human being, we do all have slight differences in our needs, and we can tune that D value there. Next slide, please. Yeah, and this is exactly this, neurodiversity, that we're going to accommodate neurodiversity, the fact that there are different occupants in a building by tuning the D value. You know, there are some people who prefer low complexity, most people prefer mid complexity, and some high complexity. And I just want to give you two examples. Two famous American artists from the 1950s. William de Kooning preferred lower D values. Jackson Pollock preferred higher D values. So we can accommodate all of these needs by making our computer tune the D value. And so I think I'm handing over to you, Martin or Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Richard.
Thank you
for this wonderful explanation. So as Richard mentioned, we started 8 years ago to take the scientific knowledge of Richard and his team and try to create tools to implement it in the built environments. And therefore, we produced a software that helps us to control the design process. And the success comes from what we call combined design. So we have the software. So we in our design studio, we would start creating a seed, creating a pattern that we think is aesthetically pleasing. And then we would send it over to Richard, and they test it with their analyzing software. What is the D value? What is the fractal quality? Does it pass the test or not? Most of the time it's a back and forth. So we had never a solution where we had the final result at the first trial. So it's a back and forth process. But in this process, we can really control the design that at the end, it's aesthetically pleasing and has the approval from the what we call design police, and it has all the scientific properties to support health and well-being and stress reduction, and has the approval from the science and Fractal police. And this is our project. And then, of course, we have to adapt it to the manufacturing needs. Is it a carpet or a wall covering, or do we do a printed version, or do we do a cutout version? And this is the next step in the design process. So this is a basic how our software works. We use the so-called lever flight as a basics. This is a pattern, a fractal pattern that is similar to like birds dropping seeds, or like the albatross would search for food in the Antarctica. He would fly and land on the water, and then do little steps like you see it here, then fly mid-distance, then again little steps, then fly a huge distance. And this is the same pattern like you would see a little bird on the beach searching for food. He would not scan the area, he would do little steps, then medium distances, then long distances, and back and forth. So all this is based on fractal patterns, and this is our basic for our software. Then we plant seeds, so we choose a seed that we would like to grow, and then we grow it until we think it's in a mid-D value range and it's aesthetically pleasing, and then it goes to the testing and back and forth. So this is how we adjust the D value. For example, this pattern was one of the first serial products we did for Mohawk Group. You can see the carpet at the final result up right. And now there's a newer version also. This is a tufted carpet, and now just last NeoCon we launched a hard surface solution with a quite lower D value for especially for healthcare and applications. And meanwhile, we have a fractal library. So we have a library of over 30 scientifically tested mid-D value patterns that we use for our designs, but we invite all of you to get in contact with us. We can provide you tested stress reductive fractal patterns from our library if you want to applicate it in one of your projects. The second design method that we also used from the beginning is what we call morphing fractals. So in this case, we take natural patterns, real natural patterns, and then we extract it and morph it and tweak it until they pass the testing. In this case, the first pattern was related to Richard's studies at University of Oregon. This is a picture of a neuron network in the human eye, and then we abstracted and reduced it, and this was a pattern that, as you see here, that led to one of the designs we did for Mohawk. So this is the vice versa process where we take nature and then morph and abstract and calibrate it to match the scientific needs. And this morphing strategy was the basis for our last collection with Momentum Textiles that was awarded at NeoCon with Best of NeoCon awards, 2 of them. And this is called the renaturation collection. And renaturation is a big discussion now for environmental issues. We have to give back to nature. This is an example of Switzerland that was with concrete walls a controlled river that has nothing to do with nature, and they gave it back to nature, excavating a pattern in the riverbed, and then putting the water back in and it created this beautiful natural creek over time. And this is this renaturation process, which is happening now everywhere, and there's a big discussion also in politics. And this is, you see how it worked. They craved the pattern in it, and then over time it became a beautiful natural biotope. And this is what we do basically with built environments. We renaturate them with fractals. And this is a very nice example how this could work, and how this leads actually to a design that we later used for a momentum wall covering, which Anna will explain you more about.
Thank you. For us, when we start one task, or we do product design, or we do custom-made surface, or flooring, ceiling, we always take in count the measurements of the space, the distances that we have, and like Richard mentioned before, which task we want to achieve. And like Martin said, we work with these two novel design strategies. When we have spaces, corridors, very tight spaces, we really like to use fractals that give a certain structure, maybe with a certain D value that doesn't force people to focus too strong. This is also could be a place of relaxation. So any surface that we can renaturate or we can refractal is for us good to start. And this is why we were joining this collaboration with Momentum Textiles and wall coverings, because they offered in this collection two possibilities. One is by the yard, which is actually something that they very often use in healthcare. And then another possibility was to work with larger surface, which is mural. So we had a great opportunity to see the fractals in completely different dimension, and also to count in distances. For example, we worked for the first time with morphing large-scale fractals, because, like I mentioned before, one of the probably most of the relevant surfaces is that surround us. We don't have window all the times. We have a lot of corridors. We have smaller, larger spaces coming after another. And to create an environment, like Richard mentioned before, like walking through the space, walking through the woods in the space, it might be complicated if you always use the same patterns. So we always offer a possibility of patterns with smaller scale patterns, with a little bit higher D value, and or larger scale patterns with lower D value. And this is how we combine it in our designs. And of course, we collaborate with manufacturer on choosing the quality of materials, also choosing the right colorway, where we always think about how close can we be to the natural environment where we work with these fractal patterns. And this collection was launched at NeonCon, and was really great experience to see when we have fractals that could be applied on the flooring, but also on the wall. And we also combined it with our next collaborator, which is Mohawk Group. Since almost 10 years, we create collection for them called Relaxing Floors, which is modular flooring collection with different styles of fractals. So we worked a little bit more with graphical shapes, since also designers want to combine flooring with other furniture, or combine it with other furniture, plants, or different things. So for the flooring, we really wanted to keep a little bit more simpler seat without too much organic spread out, in order to give a space chance also to be a tool for the designers. So this is a collaboration that we did for educational environments. Every time when we approach different types of environments, we think about the seats that also might work in a certain direction without too much mix and match. So all those ideas flew into design process before we start to design a seed and use the levy flight for fractal growth. And this is like a more organic, like you can see, more organic seeds, something that Martin mentioned it before, more fractal. Even if it's a modular carpet, you can still rearrange it and create a pretty much organic environment, and it's like a serial product. So a lot of possibilities. I like to call this collection as a tool, not only as a finished design, because every space looks different on the end. And similarly here, we also worked on this collection for specific sites, for specific schools or office environments. Martin will show some examples how he used this collection in his space. So before the collection is done, there's like months of research, work, design process, but also including the manufacturer. This is the ceiling collection with acoustic ceiling tiles for a company called Fact Design in the United States. Also modular ceiling. Very important subject for us in biophilic design is to combine fractals with another added value like acoustics. And maybe you show Mark a couple of projects.
I think we have a couple of minutes still left. I just show you quickly some inspirations of how we use the fractal products, or how we do customized fractal design applications. This is a residential interior example we did. Maybe you remember the neuron pattern I showed you before from Richard's research. This was the result. It came out as a rug by Mohawk Group, and we used it in this private residential building that we built and made the interiors design for. This is a relaxing floors collection from Mohawk Group in a research center where we were architects and interior designers. You see here the office space with the fractal flooring. This is also a headquarters of a real estate company where we the first time used relaxing floors from Mohawk with a customized acoustic micro-perforated acoustic ceiling, where we printed the pattern from our library on, so everything is possible on applications, which gives a really nice interaction between the ceiling and the floor, as you can see here in the work area. And this is the OPEC Fund headquarters in Vienna that we did. And besides the Mohawk floor, we used customized printed foil on glass solution with fractals for the private rooms. And this is a project we're very proud of. This is a outpatient palliative care unit, actually in a state hospital that we built. And here we used the first time architectural application as a fractal perforated facade. And this casts this beautiful play of light and shadow of fractals in the patient's rooms. And Richard calls this a dynamic fractal because it changes with the movement of sun, and it enriches the space on the next dimension to the two-dimensional fractals, which again here is a wallpaper application from the neuron pattern that I showed you before. This is a hospitality project. It's a restaurant and bar in Romania that we did. And here we used the first time fractal lighting, which is now one of our major subjects. In this case, it's a fractal perforated canopy above the bar area with artificial light beaming through and creating these patterns all over the space. And what it does, so we changed the light system when in the late hours, it's more bar and DJ vibe, then fine dining at the beginning. And with the help of the fractal lighting, we changed the space to get more intimate and more moving until we, when you see this reference, for example, we walk to a forest, and what we do there, so we we have this moving lighting when later on the music starts, and it's such a cool analogy to what you would experience when you walk a forest. Yeah, and one of our major Fractal projects is the Fractal Chapel that won the Best of Competition at this year's IIDA Awards in Chicago. And here we have both. It's a chapel also in a state hospital, a Protestant chapel. And here we work with natural sunlight, dynamic fractals, and also dynamic artificial lighting fractals. And this is my last thing I show you. I just walk through. The altar was a cooperation with an artist, a very famous sculptor who did the altar from a fallen tree trunk. And this is like a super fractal biophilic environment, and people love it. And we get so much feedback from the nurses and the doctors and the patients there. So they use it not only as a spiritual room, but also for
recover,
recover, or detect the relatives there when they need to tell them bad news or things like that. So it turned really out as a very powerful little room, but very powerful. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is, and last thing, this is the natural sunlight, and then it mixes when the sun passes by with the artificial light, and this is how it looks in the evening with artificial light. And yeah.
Let me, if I can jump in here just for a second, because
please.
I know I'm going to lose Richard in 3 or 4 minutes. So there are a couple of questions in the chat, Richard, that I want to get to if we can. Sure. Richard, could you please comment on Fractal's application in spaces designed for neurodivergent children or kids who have learning disabilities?
Yeah, great. So our published research has examined children down to 3 years old, and they have the same responses as adults. And eye tracking, we've even gone down to 10 months. So, we're studying, diversity in adults, and we think that it will be very similar to the children. It will be important to take into account the task. So in an educational environment, the classroom where you're actually wanting the student to be relaxed and paying attention to the teacher will have a different D value than, say, a room where you want children to collaborate amongst themselves, where we'll actually raise the D value for that. So yeah, with this D value, we should be able to, for children to accommodate neurodiversity and also the task that's being done.
Okay, I have another question, Richard. Have you done any work on acoustic fractals? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, there is such a thing. So if you take a physical fractal pattern, it can generate fractal noise. So if you think about water currents, the sound of a river, that generates fractals. If you think about wind going through trees, that noise is fractal. And one of Martin's many talents is that he's a musician, and he works with Anna's brother, Severin, and they actually create fractal music.
Nice. Another question for, I guess, everyone. What is the best way to go about finding out the complexity of a person's D value? Is there particular testing?
There is. And, our journey all started 25 years ago. We've worked for NASA. And since then, we've done a whole range of different techniques. I mentioned eye tracking all the way to MRI. Stress can be monitored using pupillography, the size of your pupils, EEG patterns in the brain. In terms of aesthetics, though, it's what's called behavioral research, where we actually ask people to rate the aesthetics of the pattern. And so we've done many, many of those different experiments in many countries around the world.
And I think the last question, is there post-occupancy evidence of these spaces where the carpets have been installed to support the benefits of fractal design?
Yeah, great question. So Mohawk does a lot of post-occupancy experiments. We in particular here are developing virtual reality so that you don't have to rely, because if you think about post-occupancy, by that stage it's too late, it's already installed. So we're embedding our patterns into virtual reality where we can actually predict what they're going to do in particular environments.
And I do have one more question. If fractals are in nature, why do we need this wallpaper as opposed to bringing nature photographs or plants?
Yeah, that's fantastic because that distinguishes us. That's our, that's our kind of secret sauce. I mentioned that, running through an airport for a plane is fundamentally different from walking through a forest. And that's why you can't just take a photograph of a forest and put it into this environment. We have to allow for people's tasks, who they are, and the fact that that building will be different from a forest.
All right, if there are any other questions real quick, we're going to lose Richard, and we're coming up to the end of the hour anyway. Any last questions? Thank you, Sarah. This information has been so fun and informative. Thank you. I think I feel the same way. Listen, I want to thank our guests. There's Sharon saying this is an amazing presentation. Thank you to Anna, Martin, and Richard. As I summarize this, I want to remind everybody that Richard is on the faculty of the Science and Design Certification Program. So if you like this subject matter and the depth of knowledge and academia that you get from something like this, please look into the certification program. We have a couple of hundred designers now certified, and we're really wanting to build that program. A reminder, October 24th, When Design Heals in High Point. And one other thing, I forgot to mention it at the beginning, but Sharon Carey and I are doing a webinar tonight at 6 o'clock. It's designed specifically for the designers in Raleigh, North Carolina. But since it's a webinar, we will be covering color, but also the basic science and design presentation. So it's at 6 o'clock. If you're interested, reach out to me and I'll send you the link for the webinar. To everyone, Richard has already darted. To Anna and Martin, thank you so much for a great talk. And I really mean that. This has been fascinating. Thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.